Hello, this is the hardcore legend Mick Foley, and if you are interested in listening to idiots, you came to the right place. Have a nice day.
I'm gonna die surrounded by the biggest idiots in the galaxy.
You're a slacker.
You stupid idiot!
Yeah, well, you know, that's just like, your opinion, man.
Ugh. Idiot.
Game over, man.
Hey, careful
Whoa.
with that Ronnie Millsap. We're downrange.
What's the matter with you?
Feel like a Kentucky Fried Idiot.
Oh, I'll take it from here, nurse.
We're putting the band back together.
Forget it. No way. We're on a mission from God.
Gentlemen, Ciccolini here may talk like an idiot and look like an idiot, but don't let that fool you. He really is an idiot.
I was going to spend the night assembling a bougie, but this is holding my interest.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, friends and fiends, and welcome to Free Range Idiocy, the podcast about everything, but mostly just the stuff we like. This is episode 24, and we're going to be diving into some controversial material in this episode, so we advise all of our listeners, to exercise caution. Perhaps make sure that you've got the kids out of the room and especially give all the Star Wars fans in your vicinity the signal to put their earmuffs on. That's right, we're going to be talking about Episode 8, The Last Jedi, so we'll be calling this one The Last Straw. My name is Todd, and with me as always, and broadcasting from an old phone booth somewhere outside of the last functional Howard Johnson's in the continental United States, using nothing more than a coat hanger and a speak and spell.
We make it work.
He is the Barry Windham to my Mike Rotunda. Why take the local when you can hop on the express? I give you the man they call Tim.
Hello, how are you, brother?
Doing all right. And can you name the tag team, sir?
That would be, oh gosh. Was it
Might I have stumped him?
U.S. Express or something like that?
Oh,
No?
we have a winner.
All right.
Yes, and bonus points if you can name what their entrance music was.
That would be Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen.
Well, maybe that was the case at the beginning, but
No?
they were actually the original owners of the Real American entrance theme before they broke up, and then they gave it to Hulk Hogan.
Ah, well,
Yes.
it looks like you have one on me, my friend.
The more you know. That's all.
Oh, man.
Thank you, Wikipedia. Anyways,
Yeah.
joining us this week, we have our first ever guest, who is now becoming our first ever return guest. He is one of the co-hosts of Scruffy Looking Podcasters, a stuck-up, half-witted weekly podcast covering Star Wars news and speculation. Welcome back to the Idiot Drome, Mr. Jimmy Dice.
Hey, hello. How are we today?
The golden pipes of Jimmy Dice.
Lucky hands make big money.
There you go.
Look at, oh my God.
Well, welcome back, sir.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Thanks for having me back, guys. I'm surprised because I thought it was so awful the first time. It's like, oh man, they'll never freaking invite me back.
No, you can't be any worse than the two of us. It is actually statistically impossible. We've checked.
Excellent. Well, if you two are the bottom worst, I must be just the third worst.
Well, hey, as long as you're looking down at somebody, you're in good shape. It's just how close they're nipping at your heels. It's the problem.
Dude, everybody needs somebody, man. You know.
That's right.
Exactly. That's the old Wilson Pickett song. That's going to be the catchphrase for this show right here. All right. Well, so before we get too far into this, we always like to thank all of our listeners for tuning in and downloading and following and subscribing and all that fun stuff that you can do on the interwebs. You can follow us on the social medias. We love the social medias. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Free Range Idiocy. We're also on YouTube. Yes, sir. We are on the YouTubes. Just search Free Range Idiocy. You'll find our channel. Please subscribe, and that way eventually maybe we'll get one of them fancy custom URLs like all the cool kids have. Which automatically means we don't have it. And now you might have heard this, although we've been having trouble actually posting our last episode. I have no idea why, but we only have it on YouTube as of this recording. Hopefully it'll get resolved and we can get that out to the masses. But we are taking questions from the listening audience. This is terrifying for us.
It's a bad idea, man.
Yeah.
I know.
Topics, questions.
Well, Tim got this idea from you guys, so if this goes south, I fully blame you.
You know, I figure what the hey, we'll get some people to throw some topics at us, see if we can field them, and, some questions and stuff. My sister-in-law, I think, is going to be all over this, so we'll get some content from her. And
nice.
And yeah, we'll
and your brother-in-law is going to be all over it because
Yeah.
you've introduced him to Civilization 6, so he's
Well,
probably living in his garage right now.
yeah, probably.
Hey,
Yes.
Tim, you got a place I could stay?
Yeah, come on down to the basement. We'll play some, Civilization 6 networked. There we go.
God, that's
All right, so what's the email address for the folks?
That would be tim@freerangeidiocy.com.
Yes, indeed. So send all of your questions and solicitations and greetings and outright offers of bribery to Tim
Yes.
at freerangeidiocy.com, which is also, you can go to freerangeidiocy.com. That'll take you right to our Podbean page. You can see all of our episodes. You can also subscribe to us on iTunes and Spotify. So that takes care of all of the housekeeping, I believe.
Do you see how that worked out though? Like how your motivation to get over the Everest that was YouTube and Spotify has provided us with a little bit of redundancy for when the Podbean fails us.
Yeah, and you know what? It's all just idiot's luck because I did not plan any of this.
Come on, it was all part of the master plan.
Okay, sure it was. I'll take that. Well, that brings us to our one of our favorite segments. It's the first segment of the show, if you will, and it is also usually the highlight, and we just go straight downhill from here. But what the heck? Why fight tradition? Gentlemen, what you drinking?
To alcohol, the cause of and solution to all of life's problems.
Ooh, nice. So we got another can.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, Tim, what you got over there?
It's funny. I go to the store to find some interesting, brews to bring on the show, and somehow I'm staying within the state of Illinois as I'm doing it somehow. So this is from Bourbonnais, Illinois. It's clocking it at a 6.25 ABV. It's a Brickstone Brewery American Pale Ale, or as they have blasted all over the can, APA.
Do you know who I am?
Yeah, I know who you are.
Who am I?
God, about to get your kicked.
So yeah, I'm sampling a little bit of that tonight.
You do enjoy exploring the upper reaches of the ABV section. I will give you that. I feel like a complete wuss compared to you.
I'm trying to be careful though. You don't want to go too high because then you end up falling asleep about halfway through the recording. So, Tim, what's going on? It's all over. It's all over.
Well, we're old, so we can get away with that. Yeah. Jimmy, what do you got going on over there?
I got a nice iced coffee right now.
Fresh pots!
Wow. What kind of iced coffee at least? At least give us a rundown.
ABV?
Is this a homebrew sort of thing?
Yeah. So I got a nice Coffee by Design Rebel blend. Left over from the pot this morning that I froze into my whiskey cube tray. So it's a nice solid rectangular prism shop corners. And I put that into my little Yeti container, fill it with more coffee, and a splash of cream, a little bit of Bailey's, and poof, there we go. Off we are.
Wow. Very nice.
Fresh pots!
Yeah, we got an aristocrat with us.
Sure. Brandy Alexander's all around.
I was thinking orange whip, but okay, that'll work. That just goes to show our differing levels of sophistication right there.
Oh, we're all sophisticated here.
Oh, sure. All right. You just go ahead and lie to the public. That's fine. I'm okay with that. As for myself, I'm enjoying yet another Geary's Ixnay gluten-removed pale ale. It's just so good. I can't quit it. I can't quit it.
Nice.
I had to go back. So, anyways, gentlemen, let's get into this because the last time we had Jimmy on, we were talking about the Rise of Skywalker, and we kind of ended up talking about this movie in a sort of side view to that, and figured, well, why not? Let's go back and explore this because this movie is fairly. I think we and Jimmy, you agree this was a good term, divisive movie for Star Wars fans.
Yeah.
So let's have you lead this off because you are our expert. Why is this such a yeah, I know it's terrifying for us too. Why is this such a divisive movie for Star Wars fans?
I mean, it's such a divisive movie in the new trilogy because it came at a time when people were still harping on JJ for making The Force Awakens seem like a New Hope and for killing off Han Solo the way they did. There was also that really small but yet toxically vocal group out there that just didn't really like female actresses, excuse me, and any sort of female roles in the Star Wars universe. So, seeing so much attention paid to Rose, which I thought was an awesome new character that contributed a lot to the story. There's a lot of that going on. It just came at a real weird time, like we're all discovering the whole thing in the social media world about fake news and all this other stuff, and the cesspool that we all know and love as the internet is just take it or leave it, man. There's a lot of stuff in and out of there, and this just came at a real time when everybody, like a nose and an ass, has an opinion.
Right on. No apologies to all those folks out there without noses and asses. There's no offense meant whatsoever. By the way, the opinions of Jimmy Dice do not necessarily reflect those of Free Range Idiocy.
Nah, but they should.
Oh, wait a minute. I forgot. Nobody takes us seriously enough to actually pay any attention to what we say anyway. So never mind. Go ahead.
Well, on the flip side of that, like I loved the way that Rian Johnson started to take Star Wars. It was a little bit of a darker sense to it. You saw very depressed and sad and emo like Luke Skywalker. It was very different from the shoot 'em up, go getter episodes, action heroes that we're used to seeing, like in the original trilogy and prequel trilogy, and with really even Force Awakens too. You have your action hero characters come in to save the day. You have there's a lot more self-reflection and maybe some existential thinking, some inward self-reflection, I'll say.
I would agree with all of that. The only thing I would probably argue with is the emo label for Luke. Only because I think that it's more just he's just grumpy. He is a grumpy old bastard, in this movie, and there's no way around it. And I think that was one of the things that really ticked off a lot of people. But to me, and maybe this says a lot about me getting older, I totally get it. Like Luke is kind of at that stage of disillusionment and grumpiness, and but I think it all makes sense. I really, unlike a lot of folks that I've seen talk about this movie, I loved what they did with this character, and I know that even Mark Hamill wasn't crazy about this.
At first.
About what. But man, I love it. I think it was such a great way to go with the character. I really do.
Yeah, I kind of look at it too as, and we'll get into where we kind of slot this in terms of the other movies, but I think what stood out for me was just the new direction I felt Johnson was trying to take the story, and try to break some new ground, because I think that was something like you were saying, James, that with J.J. Abrams, it was just a lot of, we're doing, it's a New Hope redux, and it's, more of the same. And there was kind of this expectation or thinking of, how closely will this parallel Empire Strikes Back? There's always going to be that comparison. How is this going to stand as kind of the middle movie? And honestly, it's a really daunting thing when you consider you're going up against Empire, which is, I think, roundly thought of as one of, the top, if not the top three of all the movies, just because of just the incredible story and twist that has really just become kind of timeless in a lot of ways. But it's interesting to me how and I think we talked about this the last time you're on, just how fickle the fans are about this sort of stuff. That it's either too much of the same of what they're familiar with, and then when someone like Rian Johnson takes it in a direction that I felt was really different, I love the idea that there is nothing, or at least at the point this movie came out, there was nothing to Rey. That she wasn't coming from any sort of bloodline of any real significance, and the fact that, they were alluding to the fact that the kids at that, stable over, I forget where that place was where, the racing was and all that.
Kento Bite.
Kento Bite, that one of the kids there was a Force user, and this idea that there's something I came out of the movie kind of excited of where they were going to go for the third one because I thought maybe they would explore that a little bit more. Like I thought he teed up a really interesting concept that they could run with and not have it just be about Skywalker all the time. So, but it's something that I think really drove a wedge in the fan base because I think they felt in a lot of ways let down by the Luke character and just what they were looking for there and just I don't know that the direction he went in with some of the story was really what resonated with fans greatly.
It's not the Luke Skywalker we know and love, like rushed off to save his friends in Empire Strikes Back, or was the first one to sacrifice himself at Return of the Jedi, being like, I'll just sacrifice myself to save my friends,
Right.
Now, actually, so one of the things I think is interesting is one of the things I watch a lot of Kevin Smith's podcast, Fat Man Beyond, with Mark Bernardin, and Kevin Smith always seems to come back to this thing with a lot of these movies. Like he loves it when a movie makes him feel like he's a kid again. Like all the Marvel movies. It's like, I remember when I was reading these comics when I was a kid, or going to the new Star Wars movies. Like, I remember when I saw this when I was a little kid in the theater, and I went, he says, these movies make me feel that way again. I think a lot of people want to feel that way, and we just never really enunciated it that way. Like, we like things that take us back to those moments in our youth. I think the problem with Luke's character in this is it reminds us too much of where we are now as adults. We used to identify with Luke because he was the youngest one in the bunch, and he was like, I want to go, and he was the hero, and he kind of, he was really kind of the callow youth, like, I think Harrison Ford said it or whatever, but we kind of wanted that again. We want to feel like that again, but he's showing us too much of where we might be now, disillusioned, older, and just kind of not having any of it. And I think that was part of the thing that made it divisive. Like, people wanted to feel like they're a kid again, and here's Luke showing them, like, no, here's a mirror instead. This is who you are now. And they're like, I don't like that. I'm like, well, tough. That's that's called reality, Spacky. Yeah. Would you say that's kind of, does that make any sense to you as the esteemed Star Wars expert that you are, sir?
I would not say esteemed or any of that BS, but
well, you're very esteemed to me. But that's
thanks. Me and my iced coffee.
Yeah. Don't forget the Baileys. That's all right.
Yeah, that's right. I think with your question about Luke, yeah, he is our hero. Like, people, for me, the departure of Luke from the main savior, the main action hero, that was different. That shocked people in a weird way. You know what I mean? Like, the reaction of him being sort of sad, more representative of modern day political situations or global situations that we're dealing with right now in April 20th, 2020 hurt. For me, it's almost like I don't want to see more real life. Star Wars is an escape. This is escapism. I want to get out of here. I want to go to this fantasy faraway place where the worst thing I got to worry about are stormtroopers that can't hit the broadside of a barn. You know what I mean? Like,
only Imperial stormtroopers are so precise.
That's where Star Wars. That's what Star Wars means to me. Like, it takes me to a whole different place. As far as my imagination is concerned, and I just want to go and delve into it. And I'm the same way with like video games and stuff too. Like, when I play video games, I want to play a video game with a great, like, in-depth, immersive story, and that's what Star Wars is to me. Rian Johnson might be judged as a genius 20, 30 years from now, just for the direction that he kind of took Star Wars in. Don't forget, Rogue One is a very, like, gritty, serious, real movie. So you can't say it's because of that. It's because people applied it to the characters that people hold near and dear to their heart.
Yeah, but I feel like now if we're going to follow the same kind of storyline, you know what? Never mind that. But if you're gonna talk about the way that they took Luke, and I'm gonna just assume that, of course, JJ and Kathy Kennedy signed off on all this, because it's not like I said before, like Johnson just kind of went off and did his thing. They showed up at the premiere and like, holy crap, what'd he do?
Yeah.
But taking Luke in this direction, like making his backstory so intertwined with Kylo Ren, and the way that that whole thing went down, it's like, dude, how would you not be disillusioned? I mean, we all forget, like, Ben Kenobi was sitting on Tatooine, and yeah, he's keeping an eye on Skywalker, but that dude is not like anxious to go off and fight the Empire again.
Yeah, he's
like
unwell.
That's a dude who's like kind of tucked tail, and he's run, and he's kind of out in the desert watching this kid and kind of waiting to die. That's not a happy-go-lucky sort of guy. And Luke is kind of the same way. Like, he hit that pinnacle of Jedi Master. Like, hey, we defeated the Empire, and then I'm going to raise up a new, breed of Jedi, and, I messed it up with my nephew, and I messed it up in, like, the worst possible way. How else are you going to have that? I mean, anything at less than where he was, I think, would have been unrealistic. That's just me, coming from a story perspective and trying to make sense of it in that universe. And that's why I love that. Why I really love this movie is because it went to that place of, no, this dude is hurt. Like it's going to take something really big to pull him out of this.
And I think too, it's also the journey he goes on throughout the movie too. Like I think later on we're going to talk about like what our favorite moments were and stuff. So I might jump to that real quick, but. Without him being in that place throughout most of the movie, that march he makes out the door to go face the Empire with nothing more than a laser sword.
Oh, yeah.
Just amplified, that moment by the fact that he had to journey from that place that he started out at to where he ended up, and
they might as well have just quoted like,
well, yeah, basically.
Wah, wah. Well, such like a showdown thing. It was awesome.
Well, I mean, when I was watching it Saturday night, I mean, the music.
I'd watch that.
The music. The way that entire thing plays out. I mean, it's just you're getting amped up for something. Now, how the fight plays out and what's going on there, kind of gives you a sense of where Luke's at and what he was, just playing the mental game with his nephew, basically, but just building up to that moment was just, I think if you started out with him still being that kind of, even though he's older, being that kind of, you're kind of like what Han Solo was, I mean, Han Solo in Force Awakens was just Han a little bit older, and
right.
But amazing. Yeah, I mean, he's still the wisecracking, getting himself into trouble, getting out of trouble, sort of smuggler guy, and with Luke, I just think it just wouldn't have been maybe as interesting a story, but at the same time, I'm curious where they could have taken it if they had kept him kind of in that hero mold, guiding Rey in just a different way. But it's interesting.
Yeah,
I guess for me, it was interesting just to see that jump from Luke when we saw at the end of Return of the Jedi, so hopeful and forward thinking to the future and be like, we're going to rebuild and do everything. Fast forward 20 years or so, however long it is, 40 years, whatever. Not 40 years, but regardless. Fast forward to this, I think it's like for 20 years or something like that. But anyways, fast forward to this point where everything is basically, it has all been built, golden era collapsed and crumbled. You know what I mean? Like what happened in between there? And this is the moment for, now that the Skywalker saga is concluded, this is the time for comics, graphic novels, young adult readers, like the real big books. Like let's open up that literary story and go deep into it. Help me explain this and fill in a lot of these gaps. I mean, don't forget, like, Empire Strikes Back had a real poor reception back in 1980 when that came out. There were people who were trivializing the fact that, Billy D. Williams was the token black person on set, on film, and that there was only one other woman besides Carrie Fisher in the movie, which is that rebel officer in firing control and Echo Base on Hoth. So there was a lot of that, and people couldn't believe that. It's like, what? Vader can't be Luke's dad. There's no freaking way. There was so much kickback about that. But then over time, you see how history and people's perception changes with other material, like the Return of the Jedi that came out, all the books, the toys, all the extra stuff that helps to fill in the gap and satisfy sort of people's persona of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think another thing that's interesting here is this movie, to me, because we were talking a little bit about Kylo Ren and kind of who he is in this movie. I think it illustrates how difficult it is to have a bad guy as good as Darth Vader. And I think this movie almost acknowledges, like, you can't. You can't. I mean, you just can't. I mean, they tried in the prequel trilogy with Darth Maul, and of course they gave him short shrift. And of course, you had Palpatine. It was all leading to Vader. So you can even say that, like, that prequel trilogy is really still, it's just the backstory for Vader. And then the best part of any Star Wars movie, like the most badass part of any Star Wars movie in the past 20 years, is still the last, like, 2 minutes of Rogue One, when you have Darth Vader going just absolutely ballistic on all those rebel officers and, like, knifing a dude through a door and all. I mean, it was insane.
Yeah.
And you just can't. The mythology of that character is so high. It's like you have to go a different direction with Kylo Ren, and that's one of the reasons I love the fact that he is conflicted in this movie, and that they did make him a conflicted bad guy, and they did waver him back and forth. It's like, we can't make him as big of a badass. We can't. Like, I mean, look, he killed his dad, and you guys still crapped on him. Like, dude, Vader didn't kill his dad.
Yeah.
In this movie, he almost kills his mom. Like, he's like a heartbeat away, and he doesn't.
Yep.
And people still were like, he sucks. Like, Vader didn't kill his mom or his dad. I mean, holy crap.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous. But I love how they did make him conflicted, and I think that's another reason why it is a bit divisive, because people are like, no, I just want a bad guy. I mean, do you really? Because he's never going to live up to Vader. Never. And I love how that's even built into the Kylo Ren character. He's always trying to live up to Vader. They kind of acknowledge that right out front, even in Force Awakens.
Well, and two, the other thing that happens throughout the span of this movie is this idea that his character keeps putting forth of killing the past, killing the past, killing the past. And it didn't really hit me. It's been a while since I've watched Last Jedi, and when I watched it over the weekend, it really struck me when Luke comes out and confronts him, and they have their back and forth, and he finally, reveals, the trick he's pulling.
It's a trap.
And how he says that, he's always going to be with him, just like his father. Like basically saying, you can keep saying this, but your past is never going to leave you. You know what I mean? There's an element of your father and your mother and me as his family that is always going to be with him, as much as he may want to try to kill it. And I thought that was really kind of an interesting. It just stood out to me for whatever reason this time around when he said that, because it's like, ooh, that's really what's driving the conflict for him. I think his character is truly struggling with what he did, back in Force Awakens, and again, like you said, he's so close to being the one that pulls the trigger that takes his mother out, and he holds back.
Right.
Right. And so.
We could go back and forth on divisive issues for this, but I'm actually kind of curious, because there's plenty of material. All we have to do is a quick Google search, and I'm sure we'll have hours of material to work on.
Wanna fight, huh? Fight me!
But I'm kind of interested to hear your opinion on this, gentlemen. Where would you place this movie overall? And for this, we're going to use all 9 chapters of the Star Wars saga, plus Rogue One and Solo. So everything is in play here. And we'll let Jimmy Dice play first on this one. Where would you put this one, sir?
Me? Oh man, I have it. We did this on our podcast, Scruffy Looking Podcasters, and we did this like 3 weeks ago. Rated every single one of them. We even threw in the Star Wars, the Clone Wars animated movie in there, which ranked at the bottom of my list. Of all the other ones, see, and again, I'm treating this list, because we talked about this list of your favorite Star Wars movie, and it's the same for everybody. It's like, it's a living document. You know what I mean? It's something that can get added to and modified over time, depending on what you're feeling. Like, growing up, Return of the Jedi was my favorite movie of all time. Then it was Empire Strikes Back, and it might be something else now, However, as far as, and this is getting into another arcing discussion of how I treated this movie, but I ranked The Last Jedi number 9. It's kind of lower on my list, and for other extenuating reasons than for what this movie is, because it's a great movie. I think Rian Johnson took it in a great direction, but as far as just kind of how it fits in with the overarching arc and of all the other movies, I gotta put it a little bit lower on the list. I had a few other ones that I liked a little bit better.
Right on. Tim, where do you got this one? Because I have a feeling I'm going to be a little shocked, and I'm saying that because I read the outline. I just realized as I'm saying that I'm totally playing.
I was wondering what you were going to say because you know where this is going.
Who was that guy who was at the NFL draft one year, and he was because of course all the ESPN guys in their ear they're told what the pick is before it's announced.
Right.
And he was playing it off like, oh, I really think they're going to go with this guy. And he was actually showing up everyone else like he was trying to pick them all right. I realized midway as I was saying that, I'm like, I'm being that douche right now.
That's all right.
That douche.
That's all right.
So I just completely outed myself, and I'm shamed now. But anyways, thank you. So where you got this one, sir?
Actually, we got to get a couple of James's trombone clips from the scruffy-looking podcasters to kind of throw in a couple of those riffs.
I started playing on it, and they recorded it, so here we go.
Fantastic. I had this one, believe it or not, and I'll claim what James, I think he articulated well. It's a living document. It changes over time. But after watching it over the weekend, I actually put it as number 2. I kind of went the other way, and I kind of look at it as Empire being kind of number 1 for me, and then Last Jedi. So kind of the middle, 2 movies of the second and third trilogy, followed by kind of the Return of the Jedi and Revenge of the Sith. Just kind of those 3, those third movies out of those 2 trilogies. And then I need to work through the rest of the list, but I put it at number 2 because I kind of feel like both Empire and it are just kind of this. I mean, given the way Rise of Skywalker went, it's probably not going to come off the right way. But I kind of felt like they were the movies that bridged and really kind of brought a depth to the story that kind of drove where things went, for the next movie. And I really, not that I didn't like Rise of Skywalker, but I really, having watched this on Saturday, I was really just like, wow, there's just a lot of good stuff here that I really wish had been picked up and kind of run with a little bit more,
Yeah.
You bring up Rose, man, it really stood out to me how underutilized she was in the third movie. She's just nowhere to be found, and it's just so disappointing that they didn't do more with her and Finn rather than Finn running around screaming "Rey" every 5 minutes. It's just there's a lot of different things. Not that you couldn't have ended up kind of going in a similar direction with the third movie, but just the way he kind of explored things. I mean, I really feel like what he did with Rey, and this is another divisive thing, but I really feel like the revelation that she really didn't come from anything was almost kind of like his antithesis to what happened in Empire, where it becomes all about who, Luke's father is. At this point, it's the other way, where it's like, you know what, you're just another person who just has this gift. And it would have been kind of cool to see where they would have taken that and how they could have explored that a little more,
Yeah.
So that for me is why I kind of feel like Empire and Last Jedi are kind of like creative and really probably the most creative out of the set, and I kind of put him there for that reason.
Right on.
Sure.
I'm actually thinking that I might have had this ranked higher when we did kind of talk about this vaguely in the last time when we were talking about Rise of Skywalker. I might have had this one higher then the more I think about it, but again, this is how I kind of threw it together as I was thinking about it today. I have it ranked 5th with the original trilogy in order as my top 3, then Rogue One as number 4, and Last Jedi as number 5. And I think I actually bumped Return of the Jedi out of the top 5.
What?
I think I did in my preview. I'll have to go back and actually listen to that podcast. I think I did, but I was just really trying to be contrarian. I was trying to be a troll.
It's outrageous.
I really was.
Are you kidding me?
I was trying to play sports talk radio or something. I don't know what the hell I was doing. I was
Oh,
being a
man.
dick. But I do. I really I feel this movie is one of the better of the series. And I really I'm like I said, I'm a fan of all of these movies really, except for The Phantom Menace, which I would, out of what is there? There's 11 movies, 12 if you count the Clone Wars movies. I would rank Phantom Menace number 15. I think I said this before we even started. I will take the next 3 Star Wars movies and place them ahead of that one.
It is
sight unseen. Sight unseen.
It's still way better than Attack of the Clones, bro.
I'll take Attack of the Clones over Phantom Menace.
Nope.
I will. You know what? I will even go further than this. Okay, because this is my.
God.
Again, I'm willing to go all the way out on this limb.
Boy.
I don't care.
Oh boy.
I do not think that there are any sins in Last Jedi that are worse than any of the other Star Wars movies. Because I've seen a bunch of things pointed out, like, oh, they did this and they did this. I don't think they're any worse than any of those movies. I don't think any Star Wars movie has worse sins than The Phantom Menace, as far as being slow, just like building up a bad guy and then just dismissing him like nothing. And like all the things that you can possibly think of to criticize any of the other Star Wars movies, I think they're all worse in that movie. Like but at least they're all isolated in one nice, neat package that I can ignore in one shot. So I'm happy about that. But that's my opinion, and that's why I will never be a guest on Jimmy's podcast. They're just like, nah, he's a wanker. Anyways, that was my really poor Brit accent, and you can
brilliant.
They're gonna call me many varied things, which will all sound terribly wonderful.
Well,
and I'm prepared for that.
Well, you say, well,
exactly.
Little bits and bobs there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But anyway, so now I guess this takes us into the next part here, which is what are your favorite moments from The Last Jedi? And I'm sure we're going to have some crossover here, but what are your favorite moments from this movie? And Jimmy, why don't you go first here, sir? You're our guest.
Man, I'm all on like being put on the spot here. Well,
Damn right.
I got a couple. I'll say one that. It may not be my favorite one, but it's the one that stands out to me first is when we have the return of the Millennium Falcon to the scene at the Battle of Crate when he sort of they swoop in, the action hero moment, like you get the Millennium Falcon theme going on from A New Hope when they were fighting the TIE fighters when they were escaping the Death Star, like you had that action going on, and I loved it when they were sort of flying through sort of the canyons on Crate and they like busted out and stuff, and that was amazing. I love that.
Yeah, and of course that gives you Finn's great line. They hate that shit.
Oh my god. Yeah, I know. That was stupid. That was stupid.
It was stupid, but it was stupid in a kind of like geeky, awesome way. Like I admit, like that is a dumb line, but at the same time, I got a chuckle out of it.
Well, I'm glad somebody did. It was.
At least you waited like a half hour to just completely snipe me on that. I appreciate
he's
that.
getting back at you for the Phantom Menace, garbage that's going on over there. So
that's all right. I'll take that. That's okay.
No, it's all good, man. It's all good. No, I don't know. I go for the really cool, just I don't know, iconic moments. Let's see, what's another one? I mean, obviously the Rey Finn showdown with the Praetorian Guards in Snoke's chamber. That was a really cool moment. Very, I'll say like a very new style of filming. You know what I mean? For Star Wars, that's a very new, modernly put together scene for a Star Wars movie, and I thought that was really cool. I really enjoyed that. There's the moment where at the very end, Rey and them sort of meet together. She's raising all the rocks out. They're coming out. There's the embrace. There's the moment where Luke dies, and it's like the fast forward to Rey and Leia when they both feel it. That's really powerful. Just very cool. And I think and again, now that I'm remembering it now, one of my favorite scenes, the Leia-Luke interaction. And I mean, for crying out loud, if they didn't have that, like, what is going on? They already killed off Han, so we're not going to have a Han-Luke interaction. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah. But that moment where they're on the what, I don't even know what the planet's called, but when the door blows in the Jedi Temple and Luke's in there and Chewie and Rey come in, and he has that moment of where's Han, and all of a sudden like that, just that weight of that what happened in the previous movie just kind of hits you again. You're like, oh, that's right.
Yeah. And that was supposed to be a longer scene. There was supposed to be another few shots of that, sort of explaining that and like seeing Luke's emotional reaction to that happening, and I felt pretty cheated out of that. I was pretty robbed by that. It's in the graphic novel of this, as well as it's more described in the novelization itself. The scene where Luke is just like, I didn't feel it because he's disconnected himself from the Force. You know, if he hadn't cut him off from everything, he would have felt what was going on and may have been convinced to go back out there and help and like prevent Han from dying, kind of thing. And it's a lot of, and it just adds to his inner emotional trauma, which is again very deep, very cool.
Yeah.
Very different.
Although from a story point of view, I can see why they might not do that, because giving that away that he's cut himself off, that does kind of, I don't know, I felt that could work there, but it also is nice to have that play out a little bit later. And I think that I think you still get a little bit of that emotional weight, although I do agree that it is a little bit of cheating the fans to not give that moment a little bit more weight. They could have done that, and I don't think it would have been too schmaltzy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's her.
Yeah.
That's her.
So Tim, what do you got? What do you got on your list here for favorite moments from Last Jedi?
You know, there's some James mentioned. You know, I mean, I definitely Luke and Leia is a big one. I would also say, you know, similar to the scene we just talked about, where you know you have the weight of Han's death. I would say, you know, Luke sneaking aboard the Falcon and walking into the cockpit and kind of turning it on. And I just remember when I saw that for the first time in the theater, just, you know, how cool of a moment that was to see that character in that cockpit after so many years, and just remembering, you know, seeing A New Hope and you know, an Empire when he was in there and stuff was just really cool. You know, I thought that was really, really neat, and that was kind of the reuniting of him with R2-D2 and on the ship. So that was cool. I really enjoyed Benicio del Toro being Benicio del Toro.
Oh, yes.
I mean,
yes.
he just so brought that vibe from The Usual Suspects into that character, you know, where he just has that kind of...
You know, it treat me like a criminal. I'm not a criminal.
You are a criminal.
You know, just that verbal cue that he kind of has, and
what you gotta go and do that? Trying to make a point.
And just the way he kind of played the character. And I also liked how he kind of was the storytelling device in a way of, you know, kind of pointing out to Finn and Rose how, you know, the elite and what they saw, you know, that they're kind of playing both sides of this thing, you know, that it's not so cut and dry and black and white, that these are Imperial supporters, but that they're, you know, supporters of war as a whole, you know, and so it was kind of interesting, you know, he had a small role, but I mean, it was not a role that was wasted, you know, it was very very much, you know, kind of impactful for the small time he was on the screen. And then I already kind of mentioned it, but the big one for me is just the Luke, you know, walking out to face the Empire with nothing more than a laser sword, as he kind of described it in the early parts of the movie, that, you know, taking that step out there and just putting forth, you know, kind of building up the legend of Skywalker and just the hope for the rebellion with him facing down the walkers. It was such a neat scene, such a well, you know, shot scene where he's just standing there, just him facing, you know, this overwhelming force in front of him, and then just the back and forth between Kylo and him was just fantastic. So I think those were kind of the high points for me, in addition to what James had already kind of articulated.
I think for me, definitely the lightsaber battles. I would go so far as to say that 2 out of the top 4 lightsaber battles in any Star Wars movies are in this movie, and that's an accomplishment. I put the Rey Kylo not that they're fighting each other, but fighting with each other,
Mhm.
was so epic, and I agree with Jimmy. That was so just well done, and such a different way of seeing a lightsaber battle done in Star Wars. And I would put Luke Kylo in there along this because of the weight of it, because it's the same sort of weight. Even though you go back to Obi-Wan and Vader in A New Hope, where it's not the most fantastic sword play ever, because you have a dude who's really old, and then you have another guy, and they're just basically trying not to break these sticks, and to make the special effects guy mad at them because they broke another one. But the fact that just the weight of it, of what it meant, and the stakes that were at play there and the reveal, and just the interplay, and all of it was so. It was so meaningful to the overall story. I think it was fantastic. And I will call it the Holdo maneuver. I thought that was, again, something you have never seen in a Star Wars movie before. And the way it was done, I think, was freaking amazing. Laura Dern is a badass as that character. I love that character.
Yes.
I mean, just the fact that she's not wearing a uniform, like the woman is in like this kind of like flowy dress sort of thing, and at the same time she's like, I will demote you down to the point where you're like scrubbing the outside of this ship by the time this conversation is done, and I am going to look fantastic doing it. And then all of a sudden at the end you just see her like, oh, I ain't having this. And the way that they played that, just from a special effects and sound perspective, was flipping amazing.
Yeah,
just amazing. Every moment with Luke and Rey I loved. I just love that whole interplay and all that. I mean, even the stuff that might have been a little cringeworthy that I got chuckle out of. I've seen your routine. You are not busy. Stuff like that I thought was just fantastic. And the opening battle scene with the dreadnought. I mean, even again, there's some stupid stuff in there, like Poe's interaction with Hux. I mean, that's kind of lame, but at the same time,
General Hux.
Yeah, Hugs. That was I forgot that until I was watching again this weekend. I'm like, I forgot he called him Hugs, and he kept on doing it. And Hux is trying to correct him, and he just keeps doing it. I was like, oh, that whole thing was fantastic. And then, of course, Luke and Leia at the base, but of course Yoda. Showing up kind of out of nowhere and like giggling his ass off at Luke, which I was like, that's the way it has to be. Yes, it has to be that way. Like, Yoda has to show up Luke, because that's what Yoda does. He makes Luke look like a complete tool.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Love that. The whole thing. And I remember seeing that in the theater and Yoda popping up, and I was just like, my heart leapt. I was like, oh my gosh, it's the puppet. And it was like the puppet version.
Yeah, they got the original one from ESB.
I was so happy with that it wasn't like CG Yoda from like the prequel trilogies, and oh my gosh, the whole thing was just fantastic. But yeah, those were my favorite moments as I gush lovingly about this movie.
So a question. So now that we've gone through our each of ours, so James, when you were last on here, we talked a little bit about Thrawn. Were you at all disappointed that this was how they used the dreadnought concept, or?
No, I wasn't. I thought it was
introduce
cool.
it and then blow it up.
Yeah, I know, right? As far as a new class of Star Destroyer that they're using, which was very similar to a U-boat, periscope and all, I thought it was very cool. Also, did you notice? What was it? Kate Dickey, the one of the bridge officers on there. She was Lysa Arryn.
Yes.
Formerly of House Tully from Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones. Yep.
She was also Prometheus too, she's a Scottish scientist or something like that. But I was like, oh, cool. That's a neat little cameo appearance for her, and then now she's gone.
Yeah, it was like there and gone.
She did.
The funny part with that,
it was like Rogue One and Fast Forward. Like, oh hey, oh never mind.
I know, right?
Well, and I also
like that
found
character. Damn it!
I also found it funny when the ship goes down. I really enjoyed the captain on that ship and just that kind of look on his face, like just said "damn it," but he's like those rebel scum or what. I mean, that his face just had that kind of had that expression. It was really funny. I'm just like, yep.
That was
the indignant nature there. So.
Yeah, it looks like he had a hemorrhoid since birth. That was the look that he kind of had to me.
Oh my gosh!
Well, he was. I think his name was Captain Kennedy or something like that.
Okay.
He was in the visual dictionary star of the Last Jedi. They have a little section about him, and he was a former Imperial officer in the days of the Empire. So he's one of the like whole super loyal holdovers from the Empire, and it was noted that that on the bridge of this new ship, the Fulminatrix, the siege dreadnought that they have there, he was disgusted with to him with all a bunch of children in front of him, essentially.
Well, he carried himself in that exact way. So.
Oh yeah, just complete resentment for everyone younger and less not really experienced. Like, you guys have no idea what you are doing, bloody fools.
Yep.
And that is Mark Lewis Jones, who was also in Chernobyl as General
Yeah,
Pickleoff.
yeah. Again, another great series.
Oh, Chernobyl. It is not a pick-me-up. Don't
Really?
Make sure you're in a good headspace when you start watching that, because you're not going to cheer up watching. Like, don't watch that now. Don't watch that.
Yeah,
now.
I was gonna say that's probably not a lockdown recommendation. I don't think.
No.
Yeah, same with Pandemic. Anyways.
Oh, good lord.
Oh.
Actually, we did watch it. It's actually very good in a very creepy way. But hey,
hashtag too soon.
Speaking of Star Wars and Chernobyl, Stellan Skarsgård. He was like Captain Tupolev in Hunt for Red October, Professor Lambeau in Good Will Hunting, and he's going to be in the new Cassian Andor live-action series that was recently announced. Yeah,
nice.
I know. So that actor, who's he going to be? I really hope he's an Imperial, a real Imperial baddie. That would be so cool. But
he has to. He has to be.
Leave it to the Swedish.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the next best thing to getting a Brit to play a bad guy, apparently.
No, I know, right? Anyway, so there's that random other Star Wars tie-in, the two characters that starred in Chernobyl.
Nice. Nice.
So now, before we go, actually, and I didn't put this on the outline because I just thought of it now. Is there anything out of this that you're like, man, this was the problem with the movie for me? I don't think Tim has one of those, because he rated this even higher than I did. Maybe
I do.
Maybe
I do. I have a couple things to talk through, but go ahead.
Oh, some nits to pick. Go right ahead, sir.
Well, and I kind of want to throw it out to you guys too. I mean, I think we talked about this when we discussed Rise of Skywalker, but there's a bit of disappointment for me around the Hux and Phasma characters. When I watched it over the weekend, I kind of rationalized a little bit that Phasma apparently must just be kind of like the Boba Fett, if you will, of this trilogy, where she kind of like appears and then just like gets killed off. It's just kind of like,
oh, they look awesome and really cool, and they do nothing.
Right, but I mean, even then, it's just like all of her interactions with Finn were just very, kind of let downish. It wasn't very interesting, and it ended up not really being like a crescendo of any kind. It was just more of a okay, sort of thing, and move on. And Hux being turned into just complete comic relief. I mean, it was funny, but at the same time, I'm like, this guy looked like a psychopath in 7. Now he's like this. He's like the butt of the joke in 8. It was just so weird.
He's a tool. I mean, as his first officer said that, just I believe he's tooling with you, sir. And I was like, oh yeah.
That was fantastic, though.
I can't treat you seriously at all for any. And since Force Awakens, he rubbed me the wrong way. I mean, he's just Peter Weasley. You know what I mean? Like, I just can't. Was it Peter? I can't remember if it was Peter, whatever older brother was in Harry Potter. Potter, Harry Potter. But I just couldn't. I can't take Snoke serious as a character. And I get what you're saying about Phasma too. Like, I feel shortchanged. There was a lot written about her in a comic series that was very cool, and just a real brief synopsis of it. Spoiler alert. There's a little comic series where after the destruction of the Starkiller base, there was one pilot who saw that she had given up the codes that lowered the shields for the rebels to go and bombard the surface, and she hunts down this Imperial or First Order pilot and kills them to protect her secret. You know what I mean? Self-preservation. Very backstabby. And then the book itself, Phasma, is the story of like where Phasma came from. Like, she is from this sort of backwater planet, very primitive. You know,
is anybody in the Star Wars universe from like the like aristocracy or like the cool places in the galaxy? Because everyone's from like nowhere.
Yeah. Grand Admiral Thrawn.
Okay, fine. I mean, in the movies.
Mon Mothma, Princess Leia.
All right, fine, you got me.
Bail Organa.
Emperor Palpatine's from Naboo.
Fine. All right, never mind.
Admiral Akbar's from Mon Mothma. I mean, from Mon Calamari.
I was going to say, how did that happen?
Yeah.
Was there a time warp involved?
Sure. I mean, he's a fish.
Oh, what does that have to do with time travel?
I don't know.
Like he swims up. He swims upstream in the time stream. That's how it works. Anyways,
so and one other one to throw out to you is how did you guys feel about the when?
Well, actually, one
Oh,
quick thing
go ahead.
out of because James said he couldn't take Snoke seriously, and you touched on Phasma, and I honestly, Snoke is a less big deal for me. I would have rather have seen a bit more of Phasma. Hux, I think, was fine because honestly, how many of these Imperial officers actually seem competent in the Star Wars world? Really, I mean, they all seem like they have their head completely up their butt all throughout these movies. You know what I mean? Like, I don't see any of them as really great tacticians because anytime they get attacked, they send out like 4 TIE fighters. Like, I'm sure there's more than 4 on that frickin' Star Destroyer or on the Death Star. I'm sure of it. Positive. But they send out like 4 or 5 TIE fighters like, meh, that's enough. Seriously?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can take Hux. I can take that because I'm kind of conditioned to that. And Snoke, like, I think that they kind of already had written what was going to... I think they already knew where this was heading, obviously, because they're not just going to let him kill Snoke off without having something in mind for the next movie. So I kind of always feel like he was going to be a sacrificial lamb. At least they gave him a little bit more of an arc than they did with Darth Maul. I mean, at least they gave him that sort of... Probably because they were paying a lot more to Andy Serkis than, they paid to, what was it, Ray Park? But so they, there's a few more dollars involved. But Phasma, I really felt like they could have weaved more of a story in there. So that one bothers me a bit more than the other two.
Right.
So, anyways, but go on to your point. I just wanted.
Well,
to
no, and the other one that bothered me and still bothered me upon rewatch was what they did with Leia in the beginning after the ship exploded, and where it was kind of like the Mary Poppins moment.
You look like Mary Poppins. Is he cool?
Where she kind of floats her way back to the ship, and
but I mean,
I get what they were trying to do. It was a show of her force abilities. You know what I mean? And to show it just the way it was done though. I don't know. Just kind of sat a little weird with me. But those are my nits.
Yeah.
Those are my nits.
Nice. I love the pick nits.
What'd you think about the space flying Mary Poppins?
I'm Mary Poppins, y'all.
That was shit. Come on. Let's be honest.
How do you really feel about it? I have a feeling you're kind of holding back on us a little here, and
I mean, it just wasn't good,
Yeah, in other movies, things happen and the reactions kind of make sense given the context. That one was just so kind of I think they were trying to go for the whole thing of Ren not killing his mom and then it happening, and then and this was just kind of a cheap way to kind of keep her in the game, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so it just felt really kind of odd to me.
I think the tough thing for me with that is I'm always looking at it in retrospect because, of course, Rise of Skywalker was supposed to be, they kind of gave one movie to each of the original 3 characters. And unfortunately, Carrie Fisher passing away before Rise of Skywalker, that was going to be her movie. So now we get to hear about, there was all these plans and this and that and the other, and they were unfulfilled.
Yeah.
And the problem is, in that movie, you had the opportune way of her character's death being incredibly meaningful, and they chose instead to demonstrate her force powers. And in retrospect, you look at that, you're like, oh, that would have been it. That would have been it. Either that or the instead of Admiral Holdo, it's Leia, who pilots the ship through Snoke's ship to give the rebellion that fighting chance.
The hold on maneuver. Oh, we should pull the hold on maneuver. Sorry. Spoiler alert for The Rise of Skywalker.
I mean, as much as the Empire hates the Millennium Falcon, you hate that character.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you are. Who was that character's name, or who was the actor? You hate that character.
I don't
It's
hate
like the
him.
Fire of 1,000 Suns.
I don't hate him. I mean, he's fucking Mary from Buckland. Belongs in the Shire. Not from the Star Wars universe. Anyway,
fair enough. Anyways, so I think we've kind of any last thoughts on this movie from either of you gents? Because I've got nothing. I love the movie, but I will admit there are some issues with it. But like I said, I don't think they're any worse than any other Star Wars movie. Any last words from you gentlemen? Last thoughts, if you will.
I was pleasantly surprised. Watching it again, I mean, not saying that I was going into thinking it would be awful, but watching it again and just, kind of appreciating some things that I, didn't pick up the last couple times I had seen it. And it had been a fair amount of time since I had last watched it. So it was just refreshing to kind of go back through it again. And I just really enjoyed, like we've talked about, I really enjoyed the attempt at going somewhere different, trying different things, taking the story in different direction. And so it was fun to watch again. And, kind of made me wish that in some ways what became Rise of Skywalker may have been a little bit different, but it's all right. It's all right. It's all good. It's Star Wars. And even at, I'm not going to say at its worst, but just at its not the best, it's still very good. So.
And another thing.
So, Jimmy, you got anything for us for another thing? Perhaps a recommendation or something that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Oh, recommendation? Oh, man.
Yeah. Anything but the Clone Wars animated movie, apparently.
Yeah, no. Highly recommend watching the latest season of Clone Wars, though. I see what you're going to talk about next, so I'm not going to steal your thunder on that one, because I definitely would talk about it too. But I really enjoying the last story arc of Clone Wars. It's very cool. It's Ahsoka. You're on Mandalore. Maul is there. There's a real big wrap up. Takes during the time frame of Revenge of the Sith. Very cool stuff.
Nice. And while we have you here, have you watched any of Star Wars Rebels?
Oh yeah, all of it.
Cool. All right. And what was your thoughts on that?
I mean, like the Clone Wars, it's a real slow start. I mean, remember, this is a cartoon for kids. And what Lucasfilm Disney realizes that adults are watching it more than kids are, or rather adults are looking for more of the content out of it than kids are. So as Clone Wars got to like the end of their season 2s being a season 3, same with Rebels, that's when it really started to pick up. The story got really good. You got some really complex and in-depth characters. And I'm not talking about how they introduced Thrawn in Rebels, because obviously I'm biased. He's one of my favorite characters, but you have a lot of great characters in Rebels. That Agent Callus, Turncoat, very cool. The story of Ezra and Kanan and how he's trying to be a mentor and a master for him to teach him the ways of the Jedi and using the Force. You got and the whole Mandalorian side of Rebels too, like with Sabine. I love Sabine. Sabine's one of my favorite characters. So a lot of cool stuff there. Yeah, can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, because I've been watching that with the kid, and she is like
the child.
I could wake her up at like 2 a.m. and be like, "Hey, you want to watch the Star Wars Rebels?" You're like, yeah, definitely, sure, yeah.
Seriously, man.
Like it's an automatic yes, and I'm like, "Oh, we're on the 4th season now. We're probably 2/3 of the way through." I'm like, "What are we gonna do after this? I'm gonna have to start on Clone Wars because we got to feed this fire, apparently."
Dude, Clone Wars is great, man. Highly recommend it. I mean, Clone Wars is good because it sets up what happens with Ahsoka. I don't know where you are in Rebels right now, but
we're like 2/3. We're a little over halfway through season 4.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just far enough that now we got Bo-Katan in there, and so now Battlestar Galactica and Star Wars has intersected for me.
Yeah.
So it's all good now. It's lovely.
I mean, what about the theory of the rumor of potentially I mean, well, you already know who's going to be coming in for live action. Ahsoka,
Rosario
right?
Dawson.
Yeah.
Oh. And I love how apparently Kevin Smith said that like he had talked to Rosario Dawson years ago, and she was like, "Oh, if they ever do this, I want to do this." And like she's big into Star Wars apparently.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Which I never knew, but I've thought Rosario Dawson was awesome forever.
Well, see,
so I'm like, yes, totally. I'm in for that.
I see. I was really confused at first because I thought they were like Roxanne Dawson, like Balana Torres from Star Trek Voyager. All right, I can see that. Roxanne Dawson in her prime, like late '90s, early 2000s. Hell yeah! Now I don't know. I mean, it's be pretty old Ahsoka, but that's cool. I'm cool with that.
All it takes is one mispronunciation, and James is in a whole other direction.
Oh man, I'm a whole nother existential plane, man. No.
I've always said that about you.
Sure. I say it about myself.
Well, when you speak in the third person, of course.
Heard.
So, Tim, what do you got for your and another thing this week?
So mine, I went and binged this last week, and then actually listened today to Scruffy Looking Podcasters, although it was 2 episodes ago when you guys switched gears from Star Wars into Star Trek and did a bit of a Picard overview.
Yeah.
And just really enjoyed Picard on CBS All Access. It was well done, and I concur with a lot of the opinions expressed by the group when I listened to the podcast today. So it was very, very well done. And it was also neat to hear you guys talk about Star Trek and how you guys each came into it and stuff, and just just the passion there for the sci-fi was fantastic. So the series was just a lot of fun to watch. I thought it was a really creative way to take the character, great story, and just the journey you go on across the 10 episodes was just right. I mean, it's just I'm liking how these series are not trying to go too crazy with the episodes. It's like just tell a little bit of story and get us to a point, and then let's do another season. So Mandalorian, Picard, a lot of these shows I'm enjoying the smaller seasons. So check it out if you're a fan of TNG and Captain Jean-Luc, good old JL. Check it out.
That was the hardest thing for me to get over, was her calling him JL. I'm like, really? Like
He's not from Texas,
down
for crying out loud.
He didn't bust her down to ensign for that? Like how did? Like all it would have taken is Wesley saying that once, and it would have been like the coldest ever "shut up, Wesley" ever.
I know, right?
Actually, he would have put him out in an airlock. He would have turned into President Roslin, like out the airlock with him.
Put him out the airlock, Admiral.
Worf would have been really excited for that. Like, yes, immediately.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh!
Like that episode in Next Generation when Q is turned into a human. It's like, how can I prove to you that I'm human? And Worf says, die. And John Lancey's response perfect. It's like, oh, brilliant response, Worf. Eat any good books lately?
He was one of the great characters on that. Every time it was a Q episode, you're like, oh, come on.
It's gonna be good.
Were you a little disappointed that Q did not make an appearance?
I was, yeah. I was kind of hoping there would be that tie-in. I really thought, and I again, agree with your guys' assessment. I thought actually, Todd, how far have you gone? Because I don't want to spoil it for you.
I have not finished. I've been trying to just keep pace with Westworld. So honestly, I don't even remember what episode I'm on. I might be on like episode 6 or 7.
I think it was episode 7. I don't want to say too much about it, but it's a very not reminiscent episode. What's the word I'm trying to find? It had characters in it that were very near and dear to Picard, and it was very cool to see the reunions going on there.
Oh, you're talking about Riker and Troy.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, I saw. I think that was the last one I saw.
Okay, that episode for me was just such a fun one to watch. It was just so neat to see the interactions between all of those actors and just seeing the reunion of them all, but done in a way that wasn't, it just didn't feel like heavy fan service. It just felt like the right tone, and it was actually the right breathing room given the story that was told the episode before, and then the story that was told after that episode. It was a nice kind of in between. So
can I ask you about that? And that tying into Star Wars. speaking to fan service, right?
Yeah.
I feel that Picard did a way better job at inserting the Easter egg fan service stuff than Star Wars has the last whatever new trilogy, three movies that we've had.
Oh yeah.
Picard did a great job at subtly dropping those things in, like when Picard says, "When I was ensign aboard the Reliant." Wait, Reliant? Like Star Trek 2 Wrath of Khan Reliant? I'm just gonna drop that in there, Or they mention the species that the Borg assimilated to get the 40,000 light year, transporter thing. That was from Voyager season 1 or 2, or I think 1.
Yep.
I mean, the fact that Icha was in there and then he wasn't.
Well, and I thought I think it was Ed on your show brought up the theme song, and just the deep cut there. The theme song.
Oh,
kind of
that
came
was
from
that was Kev Garbett. Yeah.
Oh, Kev.
The
Okay.
theme from it came from, I think, Internal Light or Eternal Light.
Yes.
It was the flute. The theme on the flute.
Yeah, I even thought. I mean that theme music was just so different. It actually reminded me a lot of BSG. It was just very different theme music that didn't really, not that it didn't reflect the tone of the show, but it just was just different from what I was expecting. But it wove very nicely into it. It was just kind of a very non-traditional sort of song I would have thought for a show like that. But yeah, it was really cool. I thought they managed it well. I like when Hugh showed up. I mean, it was just he was another character. He just showed up, and you're like, hey, I know who that guy is, but they're not throwing it in my face,
Yeah, exactly. And when he and Picard made that interaction with one, it's like, I don't know why you're here, but I will help you. That was so cool. And I mean, Patrick Stewart, again, the master of the human language, of the English language. You know what I mean? Like, I just absolutely
and the Queen's
brilliant.
English at that.
Queen's English, that's heard.
Yes.
Now,
quick question to dive back a little bit, because I don't know. Well, you know what? Heck with it. We've done 3-hour episodes on stuff, so why not? But I think the part of the reason Tim and I discussed this before in one of our grab bag episodes. I think one of the reasons why you can look at a series like Picard doing better fan service and those Easter eggs and bringing those characters in and weaving it in also so nicely is I think they've done a better job expanding the universe. There's a lot more layers for them to explore. There's a lot more area for them to explore where Star Wars was so concentrated on Skywalker.
Yeah.
And they really, everything else related to Skywalkers. And that's why I think you could do that with Star Trek, because you have all these different areas that have been explored, and even though it all connects, they're far enough away from each other that there's a little bit of space in there to explore for each one, as opposed to Star Wars. Like, well, we're stuck with, we have to talk about Luke, we have to talk about Leia, we have to talk about Han. Of course, Chewie has to be in it. I mean, because otherwise we'll get killed on the internet.
I think
all those things.
I actually think that's one of the reasons The Mandalorian did as well as it did, or has resonated the way that it has, is because of the absence of that. The fact that
and it's one of the reasons why I love Star Wars Rebels, and I bet I'll love Clone Wars, because I'm guessing that it's along a similar vein of, hey, here's another backwater planet and characters you don't know, and yeah, we'll tie in a Lando, we'll throw you a Leia, and this guy shows up and that guy shows up, but otherwise it's just this. We're fleshing out this area, and we're showing you a whole different side of things that you're not really used to, and it gives you a little bit of texture that you can play with then later.
Yep.
I dig it, man. Absolutely.
So I think that, and another thing, will become a podcast in and of itself, an episode of ours. So
yes, as soon as I catch up. But I just finished watching episode 6 of Westworld today to try and stay current with that, and oh my freaking Lord, I'm not even I'm glad we're not recording that one till next week, because I'm not emotionally
prepared. You need some time to process that one. All right.
I do.
But
I need a few moments.
But if we do, Mr. Executive Producer, when we do the Picard episode, I wonder if we should make an invite out to Mr. Jimmy Dice to come back on and talk with us.
Ooh, I would love to.
Of course. But of course, the first 3 time.
I mean, I'm
guest host.
I dare say I would say I'm more of a Star Trek fan than I am Star Wars.
Oh, Don't get yourself in trouble now. Don't get yourself in trouble. This is out in the internet.
Well, like
It's forever.
I know more about Star Wars than I do Star Trek, but Star Trek I had attached to first before Star Wars, like growing up.
I think Star Wars came first for me before Star Trek, although I will say I do have a bit of a more emotional connection with Star Trek because I do remember vividly going to see, I can't remember if it started with 2 or 3, but I went to see like several Star Trek movies with my dad when they first came out, and it was kind of like a point of him taking me to the theater to see the movies.
Nice.
And so that always kind of stuck with me. And I almost think it was 2. It might have been 3 though. And then we saw like 2 or 3 movies in a row, and that's always just been kind of cool for me. So there's a little bit deeper emotional connection for Star Trek, but Star Wars I watched like approximately 100 times when it was on HBO that one summer when HBO first got it, and I didn't go outside at all, which did not help my history as a pudgy kid growing up at all, because I was just pasty by the time I got back to class.
So you basically
memorized
you memorized Shatner. You're going, Khan!
No. I mean, when A New Hope was on HBO for the first time. It was like,
there we go.
It was like early mid '80s when HBO was first a thing, and then they finally got the licensing rights, and it was on like every other movie. It was like Star Wars, this other movie, Star Wars, this other movie, like throughout the entire summer. They just milked that for all they could.
Yeah.
Anyways, I didn't mean to diverge that much, but then again, our listeners should be used to this by now. My another thing is kind of it's not a specific thing. It's kind of a way of viewing things that you might already be familiar with, and that is watching movies in black and white. And this is something I'm stealing blatantly from this writer and artist called Austin Kleon, who, I mean, he wrote a book called Steal Like an Artist, so I feel no shame in stealing anything from him. But he had this idea of watching movies that are, newer movies in black and white. And part of it, I think, comes from a few years ago. I don't know if either of you guys saw this. I think someone did an old school like movie house showing of Indiana Jones. I'm going to use the original title, Raiders of the Lost Ark, before they threw the Indiana Jones in front of it, because I'm old school like that. But they did a Raiders movie house showing where they stripped out all the dialogue. They did it as a silent movie.
Ooh.
In black and white.
That's cool.
And it worked because it is such a visual story. You don't necessarily even need the dialogue to understand the movie. It's fantastic. And he had this idea of watching these movies in black and white. And one of the ones that he pointed out, which was the one that I watched with the kid a couple weeks ago, was Jurassic Park. Which, oh my gosh, it works. Like the scene with a T-Rex when it comes out of the enclosure for the first time is like creepy. It is like dramatic.
Yeah.
And I'll share the settings for it in the show notes. But you can do this on any TV that you can control your color settings and stuff like that. It's really just bringing the color all the way down and adjusting your brightness and contrast, and you're ready to go. Jurassic Park is a great one. Raiders of the Lost Ark is one that I want to try. I actually wanted to try The Last Jedi in black and white, and I did not get a chance to do it. A couple of movies recently have released on, when they released on Blu-ray, did a black and white cut. Mad Max Fury Road did it. I think it was called the Chrome Cut or something like that. Logan did it, which it was called Logan Noir. And man, it worked for Logan. Oh, it works so well for Logan.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I need to find a time when I can watch that when, because I'm on lockdown, I've got the family around all the time now, and that's not a family flick, oddly enough.
No, not that one.
No. Hey, kid, you want to watch someone get stabbed through the head with 3 claws that come out of their fist?
Sling, sling, sling.
Schnick, schnick. Ah!
Oh, man.
My kid's in counseling for the rest of her life.
Oh, my gosh.
Well. But anyway, so that's my advice. Go back and adjust the color settings on your TV. Watch movies that you have watched a bunch of times. Watch them in black and white and see if it makes a difference. And see the little things that you notice and how it really draws your eye to different things. That was the thing that surprised me watching Jurassic Park, because I've watched Jurassic Park quite a few times, but my eye was drawn to different things in the scenes because of the lack of color in the scene, and it really the contrast in some of those things made me pay attention to different things. And it's a really cool way to look at things that you've seen a bunch of different times in a new way.
Nice, dude. Nice.
That's my thing for this week. So thank you, Jimmy Dice, for once again being our guest on the show. And where can we find Scruffy Looking Podcasters?
Well, dude, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. Second time guest. That's really awesome. Really appreciate it.
First one ever.
Yeah.
Your free set of steak knives is on the way.
Ooh, sure.
I mean, they're broken and they're dull, but
hey, man, it's gonna be better than the ones I sold in high school, right? Anyways,
did you sell Cutco?
I did not sell Cutco.
I love how dismissive you are of that.
Oh my gosh.
Who do you think I am? Besmirching my good name, sir.
What am I, some kind of savage? Anyways. So yeah, you can follow me, Jimmy Dice. I'm part of the Scruffy Looking Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Scruffy Podcast, and myself, Jimmy Dice, on Twitter at Hebert207.
And as Tim has said, your podcast is quite awesome. It is a great listen. Everyone should go and, well, first of all, they ought to subscribe to our damn podcast first. I don't want to short play that. Subscribe to us first, and then go find Scruffy Looking Podcasters and subscribe to them second. Okay, that's just the way it works. I'm sure that they would do it the other way around for us too. But thank you all for tuning in, for listening, for subscribing, for following us on the interwebs. We appreciate it. If you've made it this far into the episode, damn it, have yourself a drink on us because you deserve it. And once again, I'm going to turn this over to the less idiotic of the two idiots who run this podcast. And Tim, would you please, sir, take us home?
Absolutely. James, thank you once again for joining us.
My pleasure.
Do give the Scruffy Looking Podcasters a listen. While we're on lockdown, a lot of time on our hands to consume content, consume some of theirs, consume some of ours, watch some of the... Consume! Rewatch some Star Wars, rewatch some Star Trek, TNG, Picard. Gosh, read the Thrawn trilogy if you have any Star Wars fandom inside of you. But yeah, just be good to each other. Be safe. Leave some TP for someone in the store. You know what I mean? Don't empty the aisle. It's not cool.
That's hard.
It drives me crazy. But anyways, thank you for listening, and above all else, please hit the lights on the way out.
It's like I picked the wrong week to quit drinking.
I beg your pardon. What did you say?
You're such a disappointing pair. I prayed so hard for you. Get out. And don't come back until you've redeemed yourselves.
So say we all.
I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
Yeah.